How did you get Abu Obeida to talk?
Actually, it's been a few months since I convinced him to speak through a person who was acting as a middleman, and then I had to send the questions, which were sent to the middleman who met him, and then there was negotiations because basically there were 12 questions. At the beginning, he just wanted to answer 10. And then the last two questions, it took more time for him to answer because they were a bit touchy about the Islamic State group and the relation with Al-Qaeda. And one question about the French hostage detained by Jama'at Nusrat al-Islam al-Muslimin, which is part of Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb. And here we are talking about someone who's head of the Shura, or of the council of AQIM, meaning he calls the stakes regarding all these issues. So it was long. I had a few conditions, as if he can answer by video or at least with an audio, which happened, and for it to be stamped by the group. So this way we say that it's really him who answered, and that he is answering in the name of a group. He's the head of the Shura since almost a decade now. And I wanted to be sure that he's not speaking only on behalf of himself, but on behalf of the group.
And what did he have to say about the threats France faces?
Well, he had a lot to say about France, because they blame France for the situation in many African countries. So he was one of the people who called for jihad, for fight against France. So he's still threatening French companies in the region as a whole. Especially, he named Total and Areva, accusing them of stealing African wealth. But this is much classical. And when I asked him, is France threatened on French soil here in France? And he didn't answer bluntly, but he said that all options are still open, and we reserve to ourselves the choice of the time and of the place, knowing that he also said that they are going to fight all the allies of France, so which puts us in this Sahel configuration today, where many African countries are trying to counter these jihadist group, and especially AQIM. And we have to remember also that France lost up to 27 military personnel fighting AQIM since 2013 in northern Mali.
And you asked him what he makes of the political upheaval in Algeria.
Well, yes, it was a very interesting question, and there were two questions about Algeria, since he's Algerian himself, and he said that AQIM supports the peaceful demonstrations, and they are even going, in a way, hold their terror attacks or their military attacks against military targets and government officials in Algeria, waiting to see what's going to be the outcome. And this is very, very interesting in a way, because it's a real. They make a real difference. For example, with Islamic State group, when we heard Baghdadi a few weeks ago saying that all those demonstrations in Algeria and Sudan are pointless, and they are just replacing one dictator with another, and the only choice that is the correct choice is the choice of arms, where Aanabi says that jihad isn't only with arms. So it's really interesting, because we see that Al-Qaeda is making politics, while Islamic State group doesn't make any politics. And I asked him, the last two questions that he didn't want to answer at the beginning were about the relation with the Islamic State group, and he said that they think that those who followed Baghdadi are on the wrong path, and they can still be forgiven by Al-Qaeda if they don't persist on this path, which is very interesting, because we know that the Sahel region is the only region in the world where Al-Qaeda and Islamic State didn't fight yet. They are fighting in Yemen, they are fighting in Somalia, in Syria, hundreds of dead between them, and still in the Sahel region they didn't fight yet. So it's interesting, because it shows that the door of negotiation is still open, and that the relations between people, between the tribes, are still more important or more relevant than the ideological conflict. And when I asked him about the presence of Al-Qaeda around Lake Chad and in the Sinai Peninsula, where the Islamic State is really very, very strong and present, at least militarily. He said, which is interesting too, that it is exaggerated, that their presence around Lake Chad and in Sinai are just hit-and-run attacks, and that Al-Qaeda still has aims in these regions. It didn't go any further, but it can tell us that they didn't abandon at least those regions for Baghdadi's group, and it shows us that both groups, at least in Africa, becoming the epicenter of jihad today, more than the Levant, we have two groups that are evolving in a parallel way, which are Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State group.
Okay, thank you very much, Wasim, for coming in to tell us about your interview. Wasim Nasser, France 24's expert on jihadi movements.